This is a matter members also can raise with the Cabinet Secretary for Interior. And also, I just want to bring your attention to Standing Order 43, Members' General Statements. Notwithstanding Standing Order 30, on hours of meeting, the Speaker shall interrupt the business of the House every Tuesday at 6:30 to facilitate members to make general statements of topical concern. A member who wishes to seek leave to raise the matter under Standing Order shall, before 3 p.m. on the day of the statement to be made, hand to the Speaker a written notification of the matter, but the Speaker shall refuse to allow the request unless satisfied that the matter may properly be discussed in the House. No member making the statement under this standing order shall speak for more than 3 minutes unless you have the permission of the Speaker. So, but then it goes on in 44, talk about statement hours. So I know because it's an emotive issue, we ventilated a bit on it, but we shall leave it for the next Tuesday we have. I know next Tuesday is a public holiday, but the Tuesday following that, I encourage members to bring it, because I know that there is another one, which is another similar statement that is awaiting approval of the Speaker that is similar. So let's hope we can do it on a Tuesday. So I think for now, let's just move to the next order. Okay, next order.
Questions.
So I hope Honorable AJAABU, you stand advised, yes? Thank you. Do we have any questions? Who are the owners of the questions? Okay, I can see on the list here, ordinary questions. The Honorable Member for Matuga, Honorable Kasim Tandaza. Is not in the House. Okay, the Honorable Member for Bahati, Honorable Irene Mrembo. Are you present? Okay, you may proceed.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I rise on standing order number 42G. My question is directed to Teacher Service Commission. Could the Commission clarify whether not being a bona fide local of a county was one of the criterion for disqualification from being recruited from junior secondary school internship positions in the county? Enumerate the parameters, if any, used to clarify an applicant as a local or non-local of a particular area for purposes of being employed in that area. 3, explain why Ms. Edna Mino Nzioka of ID number 22445112 and TSC number 998705, a resident of Bahati constituency, was turned away during interviews for junior secondary school internship position at Kiamaina Primary School in Bahati constituency on 1st August 2023. Explain the administrative measure it has put in place to ensure that recruitment of junior secondary school interns is transparent and free of any form of discrimination. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. I think this will be replied before the Departmental Committee on Education. Next question is by the Honorable Member for Moiben, Honorable Professor Phyllis Barto. She's not present. The next question is by the Honorable Member for Homa Bay Town, Honorable Peter Kaluma.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity to ask question number 451 of 2023 to the National Police Service Commission. Honorable Speaker, could the Commission explain the transfer policy for police officers in the National Police Service, more so with regard to officers deployed in operation or hardship areas? 2, explain the promotion policy in the National Police Service, particularly with regard to officers deployed to serve in hardship and operation areas. 3, state the measures regarding transfer and promotion of officers who have served in operation and hardship areas for over 3 years. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
The Honorable Okay, that will be replied by before the Departmental Committee on Administration and Internal Affairs. Next question is by Member for Bamachoge Barabu, Honorable Engineer Obadia Nolfason.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I would like to place the following 3 questions to the National Police Service Commission. Could the Commission, 1, explain the transfer policy? Could the Commission explain the circumstances under which the National Police Service Commission terminated the services of Mr. Japheth Mochama Mauti, force number 90638, with effect from 21st November 2016? The second question, could the Commission explain why the National Police Service Commission is yet to reinstate Mr. Mauti after the High Court acquitted him on 25th of July 2019 for all charges trumped up against him, including alleged possession of 720 rounds of ammunition and 5 liters of rifle oil? The third question to the Commission, could the Commission state the action it has taken to reinstate Japheth Mochama Mauti to the National Police Service and compensate him for the 7 years of joblessness that he has endured following his unlawful dismissal in 2019? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. The question will be replied before the Departmental Committee on Administration and Internal Affairs. Thank you, Honorable Obadia. Next order.
Order number 8, the National Transport and Safety Authority Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 36 of 2023. First reading. A bill for an act of Parliament to amend the National Transport and Safety Authority Act.
Next order.
Order number 9, the Land Control Bill, National Assembly Bill number 39 of 2023. First reading. A bill for an act of Parliament to regulate certain transactions in land for connected purposes.
Next order.
Order number 10, motion, review of the scope of education bursary scheme under the National Government Constituency Development Fund and capitation for learners in primary and junior secondary schools.
Mover, the Honorable Edward Muriu. Cancel.
Madam Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to present this motion, to move this motion before the House. But before I move the House, allow me to correct Honorable Kaluma, who is very proud of you that you are his teacher at the University of Nairobi, and also let him know that we were schooling together at the University of Nairobi. So when he's talking about his teachers, he should not also recognize me as one of your teachers, Mr. Karuma, Honorable Karuma. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The moved motion on the review of the scope of education bursary scheme under National Government Constituency Development Fund and the capitation of learners in primary and junior secondary schools. Madam Speaker, that aware that Article 43(1)(f) of the Constitution, as read together with Article 53(1)(b) and (c), entitles every child to free, quality, and compulsory basic education. Cognizant of the fact that access to funding for education immensely contributes to the realization of the universal access to basic education in the country. Appreciating that Section 48 of National Government Constituency Development Fund, NGCDF Act 2015, establishes education bursary schemes for every constituency towards access of basic education. Noting that Section 48A of NGCDF Act further allows for affirmative action mechanism of allocating additional funds to cater for education bursary scheme and other teaching and related activities, including the feeding program. Concerned that NGCDF Act allocation of bursary schemes under the fund are not more than 35% of the total constituency allocation in a financial year, and thereby limiting the number of cases that may be supported to access the basic education. Further, concerned that the NGCA board has only been approving bursary support to secondary and tertiary education and not primary and secondary, and not primary and junior secondary schools, cognizant of the fact that the failing to extend the bursaries to the primary and junior secondary schools on assumption that the two levels of education are free is a misnomer. Since the government capitation per pupil is inadequate to cater for the mandatory material requirement for the competency-based curriculum education, that is CBC, thereby affecting the pupils whose parents are unable to meet the attendant cost, and deeply concerned that continued exclusion of allocation of the bursary to primary and junior secondary school violates Article 27 of the Constitution, which talks about discrimination and slows down the attainment of universal basic education in Kenya. And now, therefore, this House resolves that the education bursary scheme under Section 48 of the National Government Constituency Development Fund, Act 2015, be extended to support learners in primary and junior secondary schools to cater for competency-based curriculum requirements. 2, pursuant to Section 48A of National Government Constituency Development Act 2015, the NGCDF board is in each constituency approves additional allocation to education bursary schemes in order to support the teaching and learning related activities associated with CBC in education, including the school feeding programs. And 3, the government revises the capitation per student in primary and secondary school from the current 1,200 per child per year to 7,760, being the minimum optimal capitation, factoring the new CBC education system and prevailing high cost of living. Madam Speaker, this is an issue which is more of a moral and a constitutional issue. Madam Speaker, if I invite you to Article 27 of the Constitution, the article says very clearly that every person is equal before the law and has a right to equal protection and equal benefit. 2 says equality includes the full and equal enjoyment of all rights and fundamental freedoms. Article 43, Madam Speaker, if I can invite you, is about economic and social rights, and it says that is Article 43, 1B, it talks about, 1C talks about every person has a right to be free from hunger and to have adequate food and acceptable quality. Madam Speaker, Article 53, which does more on the children rights, it says in particular, Article 53, B and C, it says, every child has a right to one, that's B, to free and compulsory basic education. C, every child has a right to basic nutrition. Madam Speaker, the motion before you addresses the issue of not only on the basic education as provided for by Article 53, but also on section C of Article 53, which provides that every child in this country is entitled to basic nutrition. Madam Speaker, you may find that in this year's budget, we provided for 620 billion to improve the quality of education. But that budget, Madam Speaker, did not touch on the quality or provision of nutrition of our children, and that goes hand in hand. Basic education goes hand with basic nutrition. And therefore, Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, I'm talking about, the motion here is seeking, number one, to move the Ministry of Education to provide adequate provision for capitation in primary and junior secondary school, because the current capitation only was revised in 2015, but when the new curriculum started, that capitation has not been revised. And that's why it remains per child 1,420 instead of 7,760. Number two, Madam Speaker, Section 48 and Section 48A of National Constituency Development Fund Act 2015 provides that bursary the amount capitated for bursary is only that 5%, which, Madam Speaker, is not adequate to cater for secondary schools, to cater for TVETs, to cater for universities and colleges. Number two, under Article 27, the National NGCDF Board has only been approving bursary for secondary and tertiary education, leaving out the primary school students, the primary school pupils. Madam Speaker, under Article 27, that is discrimination. You cannot provide for one part or some of the students and fail to present the other. The second issue, Madam Speaker, is the moral issue. The bursary provided for in the secondary and universities, Madam Speaker, that amount of money goes straight to support their feeding program, because education has already been supported by the capitation. Now, here is the moral issue, Madam Speaker. The secondary school students are being well fed. The university and tertiary students are being well fed. Whereas the students in primary schools are being left out without being fed. And Madam Speaker, as a mother, how can you feed an adult and leave out a child who has just been left, who has just come out from the mother's breasts? And therefore, Madam Speaker, I'm moving the motion that the NGCDF board need to comply with with Section 48A and provide for bursary to support feeding program in our primary school, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much. And I request Honorable Adan Dawood, Member of Parliament for Wajir West, to second the motion. Thank you. Hapana, rafiki yangu tunajuana.
Proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am from Wajir East, Wakili, but that's okay. You got the Wajir part right. Madam Speaker, I rise to second this motion. This is a great motion coming at this time. It has two objectives, Madam Speaker, and those objectives are in line with Article 53 of our Constitution. And those objectives of this motion, one is to increase capitation for primary and junior secondary school, and second is to breathe life to Article 53. In terms of increasing capitation for primary and junior secondary school, Madam Speaker, this country has adopted a new curriculum which is called the CBC. This curriculum is very intense. It is practical based, and it requires a lot of time and resources for these students to learn. This curriculum also requires very consistent and continuous assessment of the children. Madam Speaker, it has now fallen to the parents to fund this curriculum and not the national government as envisaged under Article 53 of our Constitution. As eloquently said by the mover of this motion, Article 53 says that every child has the right to free and compulsory education. It is compulsory for our children to go to school, and that school should provide free education. But if the capitation that was approved in 2015 is not adequate to provide for the CBC curriculum, then the idea of free education will not be there. Therefore, this is a motion that has come at the right time to emphasize that compulsory and free education. The second objective of this motion, Madam Speaker, is to breathe life to Article 53. Article 53 talks about the compulsory free basic education, but also talk about compulsory basic nutrition. Basic nutrition, Madam Speaker, as this article says, is providing food for our children. A hungry child will not learn. A hungry child will not learn, and it is important. Food can only be given if the capitation is increased. Madam Speaker, it is unfortunate that this House passed 630 billion shillings budget for the Ministry of Education. Those 630 billion have not gone to our schools. Many schools across the country have not even received that very meager capitation that we have approved in 2015. And one wonders, then why do we give this huge budget to the Ministry of Education? Madam Speaker, every child has a right to a free and compulsory basic education. But in parts of this country, other than the lack of resources, there are lack of teachers. Not because we have not approved for hiring of teachers. Actually, in the last budget, we have approved for the hiring of 30,000 teachers. But again, because of bureaucratic snafu and because of bureaucrats who think that they are bigger than the constitution of this country, that has not happened. Madam Speaker, there is a monster called the Teacher Service Commission, a commission that we created as one of our Chapter 15 commissions. I hope and pray that this House and the people of Kenya will take TSC back to the Ministry of Education as a statutory commission and not as a constitutional commission. TSC does not even take orders from the Ministry of Education. It is the minister who comes to Parliament to request for budget. When we give that budget to the ministry, the minister cannot even order for transfer of a teacher who has done something wrong. Madam Speaker, this motion has come at the right time. It is a motion that will give right to our children and will give basic education to our children and will take care of the nutritional needs of our children when they're in school. And for that reason, Madam Speaker, I support this motion, and I hope other members of this body will also support this motion. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I second and support.
Thank you. Honorable members, before I propose the question, I wish to recognize the presence of St. Teresa's Secondary School from Gatanga constituency, Murang'a County, who are seated in the public gallery. And on my own behalf and that of the National Assembly, I wish to welcome all the teachers and students of St. Teresa's to the National Assembly. Thank you. Honorable members, I now propose the question that aware that Article 43(1)(f) of the Constitution, as read together with Article 53(1)(b), entitles every child to free, quality, and compulsory basic education, cognizant of the fact that access to the funding for education immensely contributes to the realization of the universal access to basic education in the country. Appreciating that, Section 48 of the National Government Constituency Development Fund, NGCDF Act of 2015, establishes education bursary schemes for every constituency towards access to basic education, noting that Section 48A of the National Government Constituency Development Fund Act further allows for affirmative action mechanisms of allocating additional funds to cater for education bursary schemes and other teaching and learning related activities, concerned that the NGCDF Act caps the allocation to bursary schemes under the fund and at no more than 35% of the total constituency allocation in a financial year, thereby limiting the number of cases that may be supported to access basic education. Further concerned that the NGCDF board has only been approving bursary support for secondary and tertiary education and not primary schools, and the recently created junior secondary schools, cognizant of the fact that the failing to extend bursary to the primary and junior secondary schools on the assumption that the two levels of education are free is a misnomer, since government's capitation per pupil is inadequate to cater for the mandatory materials required for the competency-based curriculum, CBC, thereby affecting the pupils whose parents are unable to meet their attendant costs. Deeply concerned that continued exclusion of allocation of bursary to primary and junior secondary schools violates the provisions of Article 27 of the Constitution and slows down the attainment of the universal basic education in Kenya. And now, therefore, this House resolves that the education bursary schemes under Section 48 of the National Government Constituency Development Fund Act of 2015 be extended to support learners in primary and junior secondary schools to cater for the competency-based curriculum requirements. 2, pursuant to Section 48 of the National Government Constituency Development Fund Act of 2015, the NGCDF board in each constituency approves additional allocation to the education bursary scheme in order to support for the teaching and learning related activities associated to the competency-based curriculum education, including school feeding programs. And last 3, the government revises the capitation per student in the primary schools from the current 1,420 per year to at least Kenya shillings 7,760, being the minimum optimal capitation, factoring the new competency-based curriculum education system and the prevailing high cost of living. Those members who want to contribute, please press the intervention button. I can see the Honorable Member for Gilgil, Honorable Martha Wangari. I can see the Honorable Ferdinand Wanyonyi. I can see the Honorable Dorothy Kiara. So after Honorable Wangari, we can go to Honorable Dorothy Kiara and then move on like that. Thank you. Proceed, Honorable Wangari.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And from the onset, allow me to congratulate Honorable Moreu of Gatanga for bringing this very important issue on the floor of the House. Madam Speaker, we have for the first time are seeing children from primary schools being sent home for fees. It has never happened. You walk in the streets and you find a child and you ask, why are you not in school? They have been sent home for small monies in primary schools. And this, Madam Speaker, you can actually be able to see we have a big problem. And you know the way JSS was structured, it was initially meant to go to secondary schools. And if it went to secondary schools, then they would have gotten proper capitation as it is in the normal secondary school, Madam Speaker. But today, these children are 11-year-olds on the streets, not going to school, and they cannot raise that 3,000, they cannot raise that 4,000 that is being asked to be able to provide food and other necessities in the school. Madam Speaker, what this means, we are joking with a very serious issue and actually precipitating a crisis in our country, because we are talking of an 11-year-old or 12-year-old who is not able to access education. And Madam Speaker, what that is doing, as I said yesterday, you have children, especially girls, being lured to early marriages, to early pregnancies, to defilement cases because they do not have the food and they don't even have sanitary towels. Madam Speaker, if we cannot provide food and sanitary towels for our kids, then we are failing as a nation. Madam Speaker, this issue of capitation, even the small capitation of over 1,400 that has been put in this motion, even that one is not forthcoming, is not on time, and we have allocated the money in the budget for JSS. I have some schools in my constituency, and I can actually sample a few, Madam Speaker. I have Kigogo Primary, I have Mbegi Primary, I have Olesirwa Primary, I have Dhome. I even have a special school called Gilgil Special School that has not so far received the small capitation from the Ministry of Education. Madam Speaker, we not only need to relook the way the NGCDF is wired, but more importantly, actually, the money that should go to JSS should come from the Ministry of Education. The money we are doing and giving as bursaries, Madam Speaker, is never enough, especially for the ones that are big constituencies, Madam Speaker, like mine. You get 11,000 or more applications, and the money you give is to maybe 3,000, 5,000, all the way maybe to 7,000, and you're giving a maximum of 3,000 shillings for day secondary schools, Madam Speaker. If we add another burden, then we will need to open up the brackets. The maximum that has been set as 35% is not sufficient to cover our day schools, to cover our secondary schools, and also cover JSS, Madam Speaker. That means we are struggling with a generation. And Madam Speaker, this problem also between the TSC and the Ministry of Education must actually be addressed. And I had the seconder talk about it, because at the constituency level, you are having a problem of who is issuing orders or directives in the schools. Is it the Ministry of Education officio, chair or constituency rep, or is it the TSC, especially on the running of schools and the teachers, Madam Speaker? This confusion is not helping the already bad situation and must be addressed from the cabinet level. Madam Speaker, I want to support this motion and actually hope that we can be able to actually look at JSS the way it should be, because we have now gotten teachers in some schools, not all of them, but the capitation issue must be looked at per child, so that we are able to ensure that every child is not sent home. Parents already struggled to get their kids to JSS. And you remember the issues we had that time. They needed new uniform, they needed desks, they needed all manner of things when reporting. And Madam Speaker, I've seen parents struggle to buy these things. And then they are told they need to pay fees. They come to CDF, we tell them we do not fund primary schools. That confusion, Madam Speaker, is actually going to bring a serious issue, a generational issue, and we are going to lose very many children. That's why you're seeing the transition this time and this year has not been as good as it's been in the other years, Madam Speaker. So I support this motion, and I hope that we can actually get to the implementation. The implementation committee should be able to pick it up immediately, so that we have a report in this house very soon to be able to know what have we done, because I have no doubt we will actually pass it in this house, because it's very important and cross-cutting in all the constituencies. But implementation of motions, that is where the problem is. Let the Committee of Implementation take it up, bring a report to the House.
Thank you very much, Honorable Martha Wangari. The Honorable Dorothy Ikiara, nominated member.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I wish also to add my voice in this very, very important motion. And I want to thank Honorable Wakiri Edward Mureu for bringing this very sensitive matter before the floor of this House. Honorable Speaker, I too appreciate that Article 53(1)(a) entitles every child to free, quality, and compulsory basic education. Honorable Speaker, access to funding for education is not a choice. It is something that is enacted in law, and it is something that we must follow to the letter. Honorable Speaker, I share in the pain of the parents who are seated down in their homes, thinking that education is free, and every time these children go to school, they are found in the roads every day, day in, day out, Honorable Speaker, because they cannot afford some of the necessary revenues that they are being charged at the school level. I also sympathize with the teachers, Honorable Speaker, because it is not the interest of any teacher to send any child out of class. But Honorable Speaker, it is in common knowledge that no operations can continue without money. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, I support this very important motion. I want to, on the outset, say the Ministry of Education, which is charged with the responsibility of ensuring that they follow the policy to the letter. They are the ones who are failing us in this sector, Honorable Speaker. The Teacher Service Commission mandate is very clear. I've heard Honorable Mheshimiwa Wangari saying they would like to know the difference between what the Teacher Service Commission is supposed to do vis-a-vis the Ministry of Education. The work of the Teacher Service Commission is purely management of teachers. That is why we fought for the Teacher Service Commission to be an independent commission, and they manage teachers, employment, transfer of teachers. The work of the Ministry of Education is policy, and computation directly falls in the Ministry of Education. Honorable Speaker, improving quantity and quality of education, therefore, requires the policy to be addressed. Both the demand and supply chain, Honorable Speaker, is very, very key here. For CBC to be a success, there needs to be provisions of more textbooks, classrooms, blocks, trained teachers, etc., so as to ease the supply side constraints of education. Number two, Honorable Speaker, the students also need to be fed, which is the demand constraint to education. For example, Honorable Speaker, in Ghana, it was established that one of the reasons why children do not attend school and that their parents cannot afford to pay the levies charged by the schools. If this does not happen, Honorable Speaker, then the nutritional aspect is never taken care of. And this is the more reason why we find the enrollment in our schools is so constrained. We don't have enough students in class because, Honorable Speaker, they cannot be able to meet their basic needs. Honorable Speaker, I support this motion that indeed capitation monies needs to be increased. But by so saying, Honorable Speaker, it does not mean that we eat into the NGCDF kitty. Because, Honorable Speaker, NCDF kitty has its own obligation. Honorable Speaker, it is the responsibility of this government to ensure that this capitation is increased, Honorable Speaker, so that it can be able to cater for the needs of the vulnerable and the less advantaged in the society. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, it is not a favor when we seek for additional allocation to the education bursary.
Thank you, Honorable Ikiara. The Honorable Zamzam Chimba, member for Mombasa County.
Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika. Na mimi nichukue nafasi hii kuweza kuzungumzia mjadala wa leo, na ni dhahiri shairi kuwa watoto wengi, Mheshimiwa Spika, wako nyumbani kwa sababu especially wale ambao wako katika elimu ya chekechea, elimu ya msingi, wazazi wamekuwa na mtihani katika kuwalipia ile matakwa yao katika shule. Na ndio maana leo mimi nasema katika sheria ya Kenya elimu ni bure katika shule za chekechea, katika shule za msingi kwenda mbele, elimu ni bure. Na mimi nataka kusema hivi, Mheshimiwa Spika, mjadala huu ni mzuri sana tukizingatia kuwa tunataka tuweze kufanya kuwa serikali waongeze ruzuku ya watoto katika skuli, ili hao watoto ambao wako katika shule za msingi, ambao tunawaona wengi wamekuwa machokora kule barabarani, pengine akienda skuli unaona anaulizwa remedial fee, unaona anaulizwa kitu fulani, nenda ukanunue, mzazi hawezi. Lakini ikiwa tunaweza kuongeza ruzuku ama capitation katika haya maskuli, itakuwa wazazi wanawepesi wa kupeleka watoto shule, na tunaweza kupigana na ndoa za mapema. Manake kusema kweli katika CDF na hata NGAF, NGCDF na NGAF, sisi tunashughulika kulipia masomo ya sekondari na masomo ya katika shule skuli za college. Na mimi nataka kusema hivi, Mheshimiwa Spika, elimu huanza chini. Uweze kumweka mtoto awe na msingi mzuri wa elimu, lazima mtoto apate chakula kizuri, lazima mtoto awe darasani kila wakati, lazima mtoto akitoka nyumbani hata kama tumbo liko bila chochote, akifika skuli atapata kitu, atapata ruzuku, ataweza kufocus na masomo yake. Mheshimiwa Spika, katika kaunti yetu ya Mombasa ama gatuzi la Mombasa, Mheshimiwa Spika, ukienda pale ndani ya town, Mheshimiwa Spika, utapata watoto wengi sana wamekuwa omba barabarani. Kwa sababu gani? Wazazi sisi tumewacha kufuatilia, na hasa katika serikali wameweka elimu ya bure, lakini haifuatiliwi kazingatiwa vizuri. Watoto wakipelekwa skuli, Mheshimiwa Spika, wanaulizwa mambo mengi sana. Mara utapata mtoto yuko barabarani, ukimuuliza anakuambia nilifukuzwa vitabu, nilifukuzwa kitu fulani, nilifukuzwa kitu fulani. Kwa hivyo mimi naomba serikali, kama tuliweka elimu ya bure, tuweze kuzingatia mtoto akifika shuleni. Hii elimu ya bure inakuja na package, inakuja na vitabu, inakuja na chakula, inakuja na mambo yote ambayo yatamfanya mwanafunzi akikaa darasani awe anaweza kuzingatia masomo, Mheshimiwa Spika. Lakini kila uchao hao watoto wanafukuzwa nyumbani. Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi naweza kuwahisi wale wazazi ambao maisha yao ni duni. Ndio maana kama mama Mombasa nasema tufuatilie sheria, na najua ipo katika sheria. Nafikiri kuna lawyers ambao wako hapa, sisi wengi hatujafuatilia sheria kikatiba vizuri, lakini wako hapa bunge wenzetu ambao wanaweza kuelezea kwa kina kuwa kuna sheria kuwa elimu iwe ya bure. Lakini watoto wakifika skuli, Mheshimiwa Spika, wanaulizwa mambo mengi sana. Na ndio mimi naomba kama mama Mombasa County, capitation ama kuzidisha ama zile grants ziweze